Today's ceremony marks the official closure of Fort Ord as an Army installation and brings to an end a period of 77 years of cooperation between the military personnel assigned to Fort Ord and the people of the Monterey Peninsula. In accordance with military tradition, the 6th United States Army Band will play Ruffles and Flourishes and the General's March, and the 3rd U.S. Artillery Battery L&M will fire a 17-gun salute to honor General Reimer on the occasion of his visit to Fort Ord for today's ceremony. At this time, we would like to acknowledge our other special guests here today to participate in today's historic events. The 3rd United States Artillery Battery L&M, commanded by Lieutenant Ted Miljevich, is a ceremonial unit of the National Civil War Association composed of volunteers interested in educating others on the American Civil War period through living history and mock battle demonstrations. This group, led by Jay Lance, also serves to educate the people of California on the historical significance and role of the military in our society. Both of these groups will remain in place after the ceremony to allow members of our audience an opportunity to take a closer look at their equipment and to answer any questions about their units or about the military eras they represent here today. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask you now to take a walk with us down memory lane as we briefly review some of the highlights of Fort Ord's history. Appearing before you on the field at this time are Fort Ord soldiers and civilians dressed in several of the various uniforms worn by soldiers assigned here during the past 77 years. As we retrace Fort Ord's history on the Monterey Peninsula through 21 significant periods, the 3rd United States Artillery Battery L&M will fire a single round to commemorate each period, our own 21-gun salute to Fort Ord and its past. In 1917, the War Department purchased 15,000 acres of land from the David Jacks Corporation to be used as a maneuver area and field artillery range for the 11th Cavalry and the 76th Horse-Drawn Field Artillery stationed at the Presidio of Monterey. The price for this parcel of sagebrush and sand dunes was $162,000. Named Camp Giggling after a German rancher who once owned the land, the new reservation soon became a hubbub of activity for soldiers preparing to go to Europe with the U.S. Expeditionary Forces. Representing the horse cavalry that played so prominent a role in the early history of our Army is Sergeant First Class James McPeak aboard his trusty mount, Arcara. As the Giggling Reservation grew and expanded, soldiers were trained in basic infantry and cavalry tactics. Those soldiers who trained here at Fort Ord lived in tents bivouacked throughout the area now known as East Garrison. Corporal Robert Mullins is dressed in a typical uniform of the World War I era. Soldiers such as he left Camp Giggling in time to participate in the final battles of World War I, to include the Battle of the Marne and the Loire Valley Campaign, and they were there when the armistice was signed on 11 November 1918. In 1933, the name of the post was officially changed to Camp Ord in honor of Major General Edward Otho Cresap Ord, who came to the Monterey Peninsula as a young artillery lieutenant in 1847 and supervised the construction of the fortifications on the hillside overlooking Monterey Bay that would later be known as the Presidio of Monterey. Ord would later rise to the rank of general during the Civil War, and he returned to California in 1868, where he remained until his retirement in 1880. In 1940, the 7th Infantry Division was activated at Camp Ord, and the name of the post was officially changed to Fort Ord. Also in 1940, work began on the $1 Million Soldiers Club overlooking Monterey Bay, a project conceived by General Joseph W. Stilwell, commander of the 7th Infantry Division. The building was financed by donations from soldiers and WPA grants and would later be named Stilwell Hall in honor of General Vinegar Joe Stilwell.
1918.
With the outbreak of World War II, Fort Ord quickly expanded. Additional land was purchased, bringing the total area to 29,600 acres. The post became a major staging area for units deployed to the Pacific. Construction began on temporary barracks to billet the large influx of soldiers. Many of those temporary barracks remain here today. Numerous units deployed to the Pacific from Fort Ord during World War II, and the strength of the installation averaged about 35,000 troops. However, at its peak, Fort Ord housed more than 50,000 soldiers during the World War II era. With this large influx of soldiers, the need for contact with home saw a need for the American Red Cross. Representing the thousands of Red Cross volunteers who provided comfort and assistance to the soldiers at Fort Ord in World War II is Ms. Frances Sutherland of the Fort Ord Chapter, American Red Cross. In 1943, the 7th returned to Fort Ord for final training before being deployed into the Aleutians, the only unit to deploy directly into combat during World War II. The division saw extensive action throughout the Pacific and would become the occupation force following the fall of Japan in 1945. Representing these soldiers is Staff Sergeant Hector Garza, who was in the uniform of the 7th Infantry Division during World War II. In 1947, the 4th Replacement Training Center assumed the function of operating Fort Ord and was given the mission of training replacements for the Army. Fort Ord was now identified as the Fort Ord Army Training Center, or ATC. Staff Sergeant Renee McBride, dressed in the uniform of the Women's Army Corps, represents the over 100,000 women who served during World War II and during the period of downsizing that followed. In September of 1950, the 6th Infantry Division was activated to assume the Army Training Center mission. In 1951, construction began on the first permanent type of barracks buildings, and in 1952, the first family housing units were built in Bayview Park. Also in 1952, a law was passed by Congress designating Fort Ord as a permanent post of the United States Army. Representing this period of Fort Ord's history is Sergeant Hedwig Fernando in the uniform of the Korean conflict era. Following the cessation of hostilities in Korea, Fort Ord again assumed the peacetime mission of training basic and advanced infantry courses. The 5th Infantry Division assumed this mission in 1956. On June 5, 1957, permanent training cadre were assigned to Fort Ord, and the post was redesignated as the United States Army Training Center Infantry. Also in 1957, the Combat Developments Command Experimentation Center, or CDAC, was organized to test and evaluate training techniques and equipment. Throughout the early 60s, Fort Ord continued to perform its primary mission of conducting basic and advanced individual training. Construction of permanent facilities and housing was the major focus. During this period, numerous aviation, engineer, transportation, medical, and other regular Army units were stationed here. Among them, the 52nd Aviation Battalion, the 33rd Transportation Company, the 84th Engineer Battalion, and the 12th Evacuation Hospital. Many of the active units stationed at Fort Ord departed for Vietnam in 1965. Fort Ord continued to conduct infantry training with the emphasis on Southeast Asia. The first training facility in the United States, modeled on a locale similar to that found in a typical Vietnamese village, was constructed here at Fort Ord for use in preparing soldiers who eventually saw duty in Vietnam. Representing the soldiers of that era is Captain Dalton Thompson in the jungle fatigue uniform. Throughout the 70s, Fort Ord continued to build and improve the permanent post facilities. Silas B. Hayes Army Community Hospital grew into a 440-bed facility. The post library and child care facilities were improved, and 7 Monterey County schools operated within the confines of the post. In 1975, the Army and Air Force Exchange Service built at Fort Ord what was then the largest PX in the continental United States. In 1984, the Secretary of the Army announced that the 7th was to be converted into the prototype light division. This concept reduced its manpower by over 1/3 and eliminated the bulk of its vehicles, creating a highly mobile, rapidly deployable, wholly air transportable division. Lieutenant Colonel retired Edward Quinnen, an aviator formerly assigned to the 7th Infantry Division Light, represents the soldiers from Fort Ord who participated in these support missions. The 7th Infantry Division deployed over 6,000 troops from Fort Ord to Panama as part of the United States efforts there. By 31 January 1990, the operation was complete and the soldiers returned to Fort Ord. Master Sergeant Cornelio Garcia, a veteran of Operation Just Cause, is wearing the camouflage battle dress uniform. He represents all of the soldiers who took part in this operation. In August 1990, Iraqi forces occupied the Emirate of Kuwait. As a result of this unprovoked attack, President George Bush initiated a mobilization of the reserve component forces of the United States. 21 U.S. Army Reserve and Army National Guard units mobilized at Fort Ord from August through November 1990. 19 of these units, along with 4 active component units assigned to Fort Ord, deployed as part of Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. These operations validated the One Army concept and Fort Ord's readiness as a mobilization station. Corporal Brian Weiss, wearing the Desert Sand battle dress uniform, represents those soldiers who participated in the successful liberation of Kuwait. In 1991, the Base Realignment and Closure Commission recommended the permanent closure of Fort Ord. In 1992, the Department of the Army announced that the 7th Infantry Division Light would relocate to Fort Lewis, Washington. In March 1993, the final decision was made to relocate only the 7th Infantry Division headquarters and the 9th Regiment to Fort Lewis. All other division elements were inactivated or relocated. Over a 4-month period, 20,000 soldiers, their families, and the division's equipment were moved from the Monterey Peninsula to other military installations. This ended a relationship between the 7th Infantry Division and the Monterey Peninsula that spanned a period of 53 years. October 1993, Fort Ord was designated a model installation for base closure. This decision accelerated Fort Ord's closure to fiscal year 1994. Fort Ord is the largest military installation to close since the end of World War II. July 1994 saw the first transfer of Fort Ord property to the University of California and California State University. Today's historic event marks the inactivation of the United States Army garrison and the official closure of Fort Ord. At this time, we will conduct the inactivation ceremony for Fort Ord and the United States Army garrison. The life of a unit is sustained as long as the colors are preserved. The senior non-commissioned officer of each command is responsible for the safety of his unit's colors. As the senior non-commissioned officer on Fort Ord, Sergeant Major Richard Higdon will take the garrison colors from the color bearer and present them to the commander, Colonel Tom Elsey. The commander's last act is to case the colors. The official orders read, General Order, Washington, D.C. Effective 30 September 1994, Fort Ord is closed and placed in an inactive status. Effective 30 September 1994, the United States Army garrison is disestablished. By order of the Secretary of the Army, Gordon R. Sullivan, Chief of Staff. Upon completion of casing, Colonel Elzey will present the colors to his commander, General Reimer. General Reimer will then return the colors to the safekeeping of the Command Sergeant Major. The casing of the colors is the final traditional act in the inactivation of the United States Army garrison and the closure of Fort Ord as an Army installation. Ladies and gentlemen, the Commander of United States Army Forces Command, General Dennis J. Reimer.
Colonel and Mrs. Elzey, distinguished guests, all military and civilians, and there are far too many to single out individually. Fellow soldiers, friends, and most especially the members and friends of the Fort Ord community, past and present. The setting here probably doesn't get any better than this. It's a beautiful setting, the powerful Pacific nearby, the beautiful surrounding area, the great people. It's a wonderful place with wonderful memories, and they seem all that much more alive today. It's special, too, in other than visible ways. It's special because this ceremony represents change in the United States Army. It represents our efforts to reshape the Army while keeping it simultaneously trained and ready. It's not an easy challenge. It requires difficult decisions, decisions like the closure of Fort Ord. But we've had to make them because we were convinced that we must keep the U.S. Army trained and ready. It represents victory, victory in the Cold War, a war that's not very much publicized, but it's very important. And this closure ceremony, I think, is far better than constructing cemeteries to place the war dead in. Today's ceremony is also a proud day for the United States Army. It's a proud day because this ceremony represents successful accomplishment of a very tough mission. It probably doesn't get any tougher than having to turn over a post. And Colonel Elzey and the garrison staff have done a great job in doing that. It's proud because we know that the tradition and the history that you heard about in that ceremony will continue and will be preserved. That's important to us. It's proud because we know that the people will continue to enjoy this special place that has meant so much to all of us in the U.S. Army. Fort Ord stands as a monument to those dedicated Americans who trained here, who worked here, who served here, who fought and died to keep the United States Army strong and America free. In retrospect, the Fort Ord decision was made more right because of the tremendous cooperation between civilian and military personnel. Together, you took on the tough environmental, economic, engineering, and legal issues, and with a spirit of cooperation, you stood up to those monumental challenges, and you won. I commend Colonel Tom Elzey and the garrison staff, the Fort Ord Reused Authority, the state government, the elected officials, the community leaders, and the citizens of this fine peninsula. Job very well done. I want to thank the community at large. You have been a good neighbor. You have put up with us, you've loved us, and you supported us. We will never forget you. You will always be a part of us, and we hope that somehow we will always remain a part of you. Thanks for allowing me to participate in this celebration, and thanks for doing everything you do to keep America free. And on behalf of the United States Army, let me wish you all the very best in future endeavors. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 37th and last commander of Fort Ord, Colonel Tom Elsey.
General Reimer, the Honorable Craig Wilson, Rear Admiral and Mrs. Mercer, Generals Matz, Hurling, Senator Mello, soldiers, families, friends, and veterans. Today we are here to mark the final line of the closing chapter of Fort Ord. For almost a century, men and women have used this land to defend the ideals of democracy, justice, and freedom on behalf of the American people. This old parade field has seen many ceremonies, but none like this one today. I know each and one of you is asking yourself, where are all the soldiers for today's event? Today there's less than 50 soldiers and officers assigned to Fort Ord. And as of midnight tonight, there will be no soldiers assigned and no civilians assigned on the Fort Ord rolls. I had absolutely no previous ties to Fort Ord when I arrived here 14 months ago. But I've come to feel a true kinship with the post, its history, its people, and the surrounding communities that have so generously embraced us. I have a keen awareness of what boarded up buildings, deserted streets, vacant motor parks, and the missing sounds of soldiering means to the old-timers of Fort Ord. It is a grand day when communities can welcome back their troops and this land to civilian roles. It is a sure sign that peace has been won. It is my honor and my privilege to pass Fort Ord on to this new destiny. But my greatest honor has been to serve with each and every one of you. I salute you.
At this time, we ask that the Honor Detachment personnel stand and prepare for retreat. We celebrate retreat this morning in a peaceful state because there is no longer a threat to our existence. Today, we will observe the final lowering of the Fort Ord Garrison flag with a very special honor detachment composed of 5 active duty Fort Ord soldiers from Company A, United States Army Garrison, 6 retired soldiers representing the veterans groups of the Monterey Peninsula, and 18 Department of the Army civilian employees representing all of the current and former employees of Fort Ord. A very special member of today's honor guard is Cadet Isabel Ord of the University of California, Santa Barbara Senior ROTC Detachment. Cadet Captain Ord is the great-great-granddaughter of Major General Ord. Also in attendance is her father, Mr. Edward O.C. Ord, great-grandson of General Ord. We are very pleased that they are able to be here today to represent the Ord family on this historic occasion.
Sound retreat.
Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves crown thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self their country loved, and mercy more than life. America, America, may God thy gold refine, till all success be nobleness, and every gain divine.
As we depart Fort Ord for the final time, we render this salute to all of our fallen comrades and to all of the soldiers and civilians who have passed through Fort Ord's gates. Military personnel are reminded to salute during the playing of taps. Old Bill's departure marks the conclusion of this morning's events. We thank you for your participation in today's historic ceremony.